morning, everybody, and welcome to this morning's Facebook Live, which is about adults and sibling rivalry among adult siblings, and why does this continue to happen. I've been promising this blog and this video for quite some time, ever since I did the blog and video on sibling rivalry in childhood. It seemed to have struck a chord with so many people. And you said, well, that's still affecting me as an adult, and what can I do about it? So let's talk about that. So you can check out this week's blog at www.deborahbyrnepsychologyservices.com, as always. And I am Deborah Byrne, known across social media as DBpsychology. So, as I said, most of us think about sibling rivalry. We think about children, actual little people. May have it again with teenagers, but it tends to peter out after that, after the hormones settle down. We think for most people that would be right. The other time we see it, and you might have recognized it, is in a film, in a TV show, that the family is highly competitive with one another. You have an amazing fortune and people are vying for that fortune. And that happens. That happens not just in television shows, but in reality too. So there's nothing like money. So that's basically what we think of. We don't tend to think of sibling rivalry continuing into adulthood, unless you are affected by it, or you can see it in, a section of your family among particular cousins or something. You see it happening there. But it can be very real for people and very damaging. It is highly damaging to the people involved on both sides. People act out, and these will be some of the signs of it, that there's jealousy there, highly competitive with one another, put downs and comments are made, one-upmanship. They're also trying to gather in other family members, particularly parents if they're still alive, and they're trying to get them on their side because their side is right. So they try to get everybody on their side to the exclusion of the person that is being victimized here. And it is very much a case of one trying to dominate the other. And that is, as I said, very, very damaging. And I'll come on to more of that in a little while. So as I said, it usually develops in childhood. And there are behaviours that develop because they're not being challenged or corrected by the parents themselves. And it will continue if it's not challenged, because it becomes a way of life, a way of interacting among the siblings. And there's nothing like your sibling to know how to wind you up the right way. They always know, they know you so well that they can, unless you actually change, and we'll talk about that in a minute, they always know the right thing to just flick a switch. And people clash, or people are getting competitive with one another, or whatever the other, the one-upmanship or the jealousy and all that still is there. So, we have to think about disengaging and that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So why would this happen? Usually it happens, and I'm just going to run very briefly through these because they are in more detail in the blog, and as I said, I've already covered them in the children rivalry blog as well, and video there. So the child generally can feel threatened by the new arrival. Happens all the time. It's quite common. But parents can then make sure that both children are treated equally and that the child doesn't feel neglected or unloved. But when they are, or they perceive themselves to be excluded or unloved or neglected or unequal to the other child, if they are perceiving that the other child has received more praise, they get more punishment, or they feel they're getting more punishment, that can, of course, develop sibling rivalry there. The other times it can develop is when the child is developing as they grow, and they start to develop their own interest, talents, and personality. There can be a split there. Sometimes it's because the child is not in line with the parents' values or the family's values, beliefs, or that if the child is pushing against that. When that happens, in fact, it can be encouraged in order to bring the child back into the fold and bring the child back in to the parents' way of believing and the parents and the family values, to bring them in. They can allow a sibling to bully or to bring the other child back into line there. And that's horrible because the parents can then join in as well. The other time would be that, if they're not getting, if child isn't getting enough attention, as I said, from the parents, they can start to put the other child down in order to, it's their way of getting attention from the parents themselves. It can be quite aggressive. It can get verbally abusive, bullying tactics, verbally abusive, physically abusive. So, that we can see that in children. And this can continue on up into adulthood, and the parents are still encouraging that, as I said, because the child, the adult now, has stepped outside what is considered the family values or beliefs or norms, and then they're trying to be constantly dragged back into the family and brought back into line. So that can continue, and that's sometimes why it can continue into adulthood as well. The other time is that as the talents are developing, or as a child develops. Remember, children also develop at different stages. Maybe somebody in the family has developed they're developing quicker than the other children in the family. So that can cause problems because the parents can, put a lot of praise onto a child for developing so early, can put a lot of praise onto a child because they have a specific talent, which is in line with what the parents believe should be a talent a child has. But if the other child hasn't developed a talent that they believe in, or they don't see that that talent is of any use, they may not get as much praise, as much the encouragement, as much support as the sibling who is, the perfect child for the parent. Of course, we will also see it in children who are vying for the very basics of care, which would be food and water and shelter and things like that. So you're talking about homes that have neglect in them, but also homes that have abuse in them, so sexual abuse in them, or parents have addictions and things like that. So yes, there will be competition to get the very basics there. Very basics of safety and security and love will not be it's not a very healthy environment there. So that is an instance where sibling rivalry can occur, of course. Now, you would think that as people become adults, that this would, all of that, they would stop and think and go, oh no, this is not the right way to behave, that I shouldn't be doing this anymore, and that they're mature enough to leave those behaviors behind. Unfortunately, in some instances, no, that doesn't happen. It can in fact become a way of life in terms of a way of how they interact with their other siblings. It stays that way. It's almost like it's frozen in time. So every time those siblings meet up, the same pettiness and the same competitiveness, the same one-manship, the same jealousies all come up to the surface, and they interact in the same way. And as I said, at the start, like they will try and grab hold of other family members and draw them into it, including the parents, to try and get them all on the one side. Now I'll go into a few more symptoms and signs in the blog, so do check that out. It's in more detail there for you to check that out. Now, the effects of all this on adults who are engaged in this, it does and can affect in a person's entire life. And I have to stress this, that, you know, the damage that is left around from childhood and can be to such an extent that it'll be long lasting and quite devastating for somebody. So I would highly recommend that if you've been engaged in this and you know this is still continuing on, particularly around bullying, it's just so wearing on you as a human being, that therapy would be the way to go. You really need, if you want to recover from this, you want to change the relationship with the person and the people involved, that you would in fact engage in some form of therapy. I would highly recommend that. You know, people who have been subjected to this kind of behavior, it can have such an impact on their own ability to trust themselves and trust others. So they're going to have relationship difficulties as well. And it can be, as I said at the start, carried on to the next generation, because we'll teach our kids what we learned as children. We will parent the way our parents parented us, unless we make a very, very conscious decision to move away from that, to get ourselves sorted out, and to you know, get therapy, and then to move on and seek healthier ways of dealing with this. So please, I have more details about that again in the blog, so do check it out. And you know, consider therapy. So how do you deal with it? Well, my first recommendation as to whether, you know, if you realize, oh, I have been doing this and I am, you know, I have been bullying my siblings, or I have been engaging in unhealthy behaviors with my siblings, you know, you are also a victim, so you need help too. So I would also recommend there that you get therapy as well, to help you deal with this in a more healthy manner. And to change your mindset. And I would also address people who have been the victims of this. You definitely would need some therapy to help you here, to address the past and to learn new coping mechanisms for the future. So one of the ways, though, that you can in fact deal with it very quickly is to disengage from these people and start to disengage from them. And to set healthy boundaries, because bad behavior is never, ever, ever acceptable. You know, you never should feel you have to be a punch bag for somebody else. And that's, I'm not just talking about physically here, I'm talking about verbally, emotionally, and even sometimes financially. This can come down to, you know, constantly having to pay your siblings' debts off and things like that. So think about, you know, that you should start to disengage and not accept bad behavior with them, and start setting healthy boundaries with these people. So concentrating on changing your own behavior in response to this is very, very important. And as I said, therapy would be the way to go. But if at the moment you are waiting to get therapy, or you're looking to some maybe quicker wins just to get you started off while you're waiting to go into therapy, I do have a mums group. The mums group is a free group on Facebook, and I will put a link in the description so you can click into that and join it. And right now we are covering this topic in our group. We're talking about dealing with negative people. So it just doesn't incorporate siblings, it incorporates dealing with family, other family members, other friends, and work colleagues even. So anywhere there are negative people in our lives, and how we can cope and disengage from them and learn to set healthier boundaries with these people. We're covering that in the unit at the moment in my group, Less Stress, More Success. So if you want to, you can. If you are a mum and you'd like to join the group, please do so. I'd encourage you to do so. The other thing I would say to you is, in my book, The Building Blocks of Self-Care, I do have worksheets and chapters enabling you to do this kind of work. If you wanted to start self-helping yourself right this minute today, and I will put a link in the description below as to where you can buy it, you can engage there as well. You can do that as a self-help in a privacy of your own home. But I would, as I said, with this one in particular, I do highly recommend that you get therapy to help you overcome what has happened to you in the past, and to set those healthy coping mechanisms in place right here, right now, in the future. So I'm going to leave it there for this morning. And as always, I say good morning to Deirdre. And thank you to everybody who watches live and to everybody who watches in replay, because I know there are plenty of people who watch in replay. And I will talk to you all next week. The blog on Monday is about gaslighting. So that's another relationship type of blog. And it doesn't just affect people who are in intimate relationships. Gaslighting tactics can be used by even our work colleagues. So do check that out on Monday. And as always, I'll be here next Saturday morning doing a Facebook Live about that. Thank you all for listening.